say, Taz writes, so you cannot say that suddenly a mitzvah changes so drastically with the time of the generations. At one time it was a mitzvah to write a Sefer Torah, which is thousands of dollars, and now the mitzvah is just to buy a Sefer. You buy one of my svarim, you're good. You did your mitzvah. So the Taz doesn't like that, and many others also don't want to completely uproot the mitzvah. And they learn that that still is today a positive command for a Jew to write a Sefer Torah. And that leaves us with the question, then how do we fulfill it? So the Rebbe, there was 2 sichos the Rebbe gave about this subject. There were 2 talks the Rebbe dedicated to this subject. The first one is what we reviewed a few weeks ago, and the second one I did not remember it. At first, if there wanted to say, so we see the custom, since we see people not buying, not writing Sefer Torah, so it must be that the custom is like the second opinion, which says you don't have to anymore today, and it's fulfilled through purchase of time. That's a major foundation halacha, that we follow the tradition, we follow the custom. So you're right, there is a machlokes, and you're right, we're not fulfilling the mitzvah according to this opinion. But then we have another sifra.
Yeah, I have a question. You said previous time that at that time, anyone was capable to write a Sefer Torah before you.
Correct. And
nowadays, in terms of time, capacities, and money, has nothing to do. So how could we compare this mitzvah that was given at the time, and the people were capable to do it individually without putting in not much money? They had time to do it. To nowadays, who has the time to do it?
So you're asking an interesting question. How with all the advancement of the generation are we so backwards?
Very much.
Remind me of the famous joke. The businessman, visits in the middle of a lake in upstate India. This guy lives, 50 miles from the nearest home. Grows some corn or picks some fish and sells them. He meets a businessman who's doing an adventure, and he sees the guy and he says, "Listen, this fish is so delicious. Why don't you go sell it? Why don't you go?" And he says, "What for?" He says, "So one day you can relax on the lake and enjoy life." I said, "I'm doing that right now." So we're going a little backwards, you're saying. In any event, bottom line is that, but let's start going through the details of how it's fulfilled and what the great, amazing novelty that we gave in the second. So let's first backtrack a little bit. Before there was a discussion of change, how was this originally fulfilled, this mitzvah? So it's clearly ruled in Shulchan Aruch that someone who inherited a Sefer Torah does not fulfill the mitzvah. Likewise, someone who buys a kosher Sefer Torah does not fulfill the mitzvah. And the reason it's brought down is because he needs to show effort. There has to be effort involved, that he went ahead and did something. Now, not everyone agrees with this, because paying $30,000 for somebody's Sefer Torah is effort. That's money. How do you make that money? Money is money, right? So this is the Machlokes Rishonim. Tosfos says you're not Yetze, and that's how the Rama rules. Well, Rashi says you are Yetze. So it's a dispute. If you are Yetzer or not, by purchasing a Sefer Torah, a kosher Sefer Torah. But let's just say, as the Rama writes, that a person is not Yetzer. Nonetheless, there's still 2 other ways he can be Yetzer, even if he's not a scribe. So this was one inaccuracy that we said. If you hire a Sefer from the beginning to write a Sefer Torah for you, then he's considered your Shliach, and you are Yetzer Mitzvah.
It's like having a moil.
Right.
Having what?
So
having a shliach, moil your son instead of you doing it.
Right. Even though there's discussion in the Poskim as to why this helps and why we don't understand this to be a mitzvah shebegufo, like tefillin, and this is the point I brought up a few weeks ago. Nonetheless, the halacha is that Mr. Gemara Menachos, that to hire a sefer is valid. Likewise, to purchase a puzzle sefer Torah, and for you to then go ahead and fix it, a scribe to fix it, even if it's only one letter, is also valid. So you can. So it's interesting. By purchasing a kosher sefer Torah, you don't fulfill the mitzvah according to many. By purchasing a puzzle one and then fixing it, you do fulfill the mitzvah. That's what we mentioned.
Puzzle ones on
the logic is because you turned it into being a kosher sefer Torah through your toil. By the kosher one, it was already ready.
So go back. You
makes sense.
Go to a soul fair. Who just finished writing a Sefer Torah, and you buy it, and you're not fulfilling the mitzvah. But if you go to that same sofer before he starts and say, I hire you to do it, then you
Yeah, correct.
So the logic for that is?
The logic is because he, at the time of him writing it, when you hired him, he was acting as your emissary. So it's as if you're writing it.
No, I understand the legal of the age.
Right.
But
You didn't do the effort at the time of the writing. That's the idea. Did you place due effort at the time of the writing of the scroll? Yes or no? And so if you just bought it ready-made, that means no. That's like
the same amount of money doesn't count.
right. The money doesn't make a difference. That's the novelty. Again, not everyone agrees. Rashi's of opinion that it's some pesachim rule that it is okay. You are still yaitse. But the Ramah in the Shulchan Aruch does rule that a person is not yaitse.
From the purchase of a completed Sefer Torah.
Correct.
Okay.
So the usual thing is that somebody is almost finished with it and you buy a certain portion.
Oh, okay, so that's our next point. Beautiful. That's our next point. So how much, here's our next question, and this is where I didn't really go through this 2 weeks ago. I said I was going to do my homework, and here we are. So let's do this. Do you fulfill a mitzvah through buying a letter in the Sefer Torah? Do you fulfill a mitzvah through writing a letter in the Sefer Torah? Now they're collecting money for past dues. That, of course, we already know the answer for that. Even if you paid for the whole Sefer Torah, it would be a problem. You wouldn't be fulfilling the mitzvah according to many. Certainly in this case, you're only buying a letter after it's already done. So our question is limited to it's being written, the process, you purchase a letter, or you actually even write a letter. So one thing's clear. To join a Hachnasa Sefer Torah, let's say you're going to do Hachnasa Sefer Torah one day, and you're going to invite everybody here to come and write a letter. Big mitzvah to write a letter in the Sefer Torah. We all think we're fulfilling a mitzvah writing the Sefer Torah. No. Because it's your Sefer Torah. You own it. I don't fulfill the mitzvah if I don't own it. Now, if I tell you, are you willing to make a kinyan with me so I own part of the Sefer Torah too? And you say, no way, Jose. This is my mitzvah. Then we got a problem. Then nobody's fulfilling the mitzvah. So the act of writing a letter does. In fact, a sefer could write 50 Sefer Torahs his whole life and never fulfill the mitzvah because he's always doing it for somebody else. It's not his. Can't share. So the question here is, can you do it in a partnership, a communal Sefer Torah? What's the status of a communal Sefer Torah? If a community writes a Sefer Torah, a number of people get together writing Sefer Torah for the purpose of the mitzvah, we have, everybody will give $100 for 100 letters, whatever it is. Does that work? Or $1 for a letter? So, this is a machlekes. The Pesach Tshuva brings a debate about this. And there isn't a conclusion there. We mentioned this a few weeks ago. There isn't a conclusion there. And he, on the one hand, he says that perhaps you have to own the whole thing. It has to be entirely yours. So what does it help that you own one letter, or even if you own 99% of the letters? Which, by the way, would be another reason why you should not give away part of your Sefer Torah, because if you do, you're putting your mitzvah in jeopardy. So
didn't you say you could just have a Sefer fix one bustle letter in a Sefer Torah?
Correct, but you have to own it.
Oh.
There's two things here. There's the owning, and the owning, before you owned it, you made it kosher. You placed the due effort to make it kosher. You hired the sefer, you bought a pasuk there and had the last letter written by you or by a sefer. You need two ingredients to fulfill this mitzvah. Okay? Lacking either one of them would be no good. So in this situation, if it's communal Sefer Torah, we're basically left under dispute. It's not clear one way or the other way. And so basically this would sound like that the only way really today to fulfill the mitzvah properly, like everyone agrees, is to actually hire a sefer to write a sefer Torah for you, or purchase a puzzle one and have it fixed. Those are the only two ways. However, the Rabbi here came up with a very interesting chiddush, which is written in also in different svarim that were written after the Sikha was said. They adapted this novelty in Halacha to novelize a way out of how to fulfill this mitzvah. And the Rabbi said the following, that a communal Sefer Torah, we see that irrelevant of this debate, practically the custom was, since already the Pesach Tshuva's times, he testifies to this, that people would write a communal Sefer Torah for the sake of fulfilling the mitzvah. So why did they do this? What, were all their rabbanim and sages ignoramuses? Do they not know the sides of the discussion? Obviously, they were relying on something that circumvents this debate, whether you have to own it totally or not. And here's where the Rebbe Mavla is very interesting. He says like this. Again, in the first sikh, he says you don't fulfill the mitzvah through this. So the only way you can fulfill the mitzvah is by buying svarim today. That's the minhag today, that we fulfill the mitzvah. In the second sikh, the Rebbe backtracked, and the Rebbe said that with a communal sefer Torah, you can fulfill the biblical mitzvah if you personally buy a letter. How? How do you circumvent this debate of maybe you have to own the whole thing? It says like this. There's a concept called esrog b'shutfis. An esrog, we all know that daled minim, the 4 species on sukkahs, have to be owned entirely on the first day by the person shaking it. Entirely. So many people, especially back in the day, would buy an esrog, with communal funds. The communities, how does anyone feel the obligation? So it would be matanam nas lachser. You give it to everyone, gives it to other people as a present on condition to return. So we can apply the same concept here. That since we're writing the communal Sefer Torah for the sake of us fulfilling the mitzvah of writing the Sefer Torah, to begin with, we have the intent that everyone here is having in mind that it belongs to the other person. And therefore, in truth, every single person who participated in funding the writing of this Sefer Torah owns the entire Sefer Torah. Now, how does that make sense? Because how can everyone own the entire thing?
So there's a question.
It's a partnership.
What's the
Well, no, but we already said partnership is no good. It's a discussion. It's unanswered.
What's the definition of a communal Sefer Torah?
If right now we collect money amongst our table and write a Sefer Torah together.
Okay.
Pay a sefer.
Suppose you belong to a shul, you're a member, and the shul is going to have a Sefer Torah written, and you make your contribution.
To the Sefer Torah.
Yeah.
While it's being written, yes.
You own the Sefer Torah
How much
because you belong to the synagogue.
Yeah,
In
but
other
how
words,
much of it do you own? When a shul would buy an esrog, again, let's backtrack. When a shul would buy an esrog on Sukkot, this was reality back in the day. Not everyone had a srogan, maybe one person in the whole city. The shul bought an esrog. They paid a lot of money, they got an esrog, okay? It belongs to the shul. Can anybody be yaitz the first day? It belongs to everyone. No one can be yaitz unless everyone relinquishes ownership. Now, what does that mean? That when each person shakes it, everybody who has a partnership in that esrog relinquishes his ownership at that moment, so it all belongs now to the person shaking it. The question about the Sefer Torah is that when are we relinquishing ownership? The Rebbe says like this. When you get an aliyah in the communal Sefer Torah, that's the time that it's called Tanai Bezdin, that it's as if it was stipulated in the time of the writing, that at the time that each individual gets an aliyah, he is being given the Sefer Torah. It's his Sefer Torah. Everybody relinquishes ownership to him. So, based on that, it would end up that there's an Indian, first of all, to try to get an aliyah in the communal Sefer Torah that you donate to. But past that we take turns in each owning this communal Sefer Torah, even for a little bit. And therefore, that's a way of how the mitzvah can be fulfilled. Basically, this Rebbe concluded in that talk that aside for the great spiritual benefit of writing a Sefer Torah, of a community writing a Sefer Torah, this famous letter of the Rebbe Rayatz, that the Baal Shem Tov once instructed a Sefer Torah be written in a town that he saw a terrible decree on the town, and there were people that were dying from a disease there, and he said that they should all write a communal Sefer Torah in that merit. But furthermore, in addition to the spiritual merit, it should also be adapted to try to fulfill the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah in the accustomed way, aside from just buying stuff. So to conclude, is that in addition to the positive command of buying Sfarim Torah that we explained in the previous class, a person should also endeavor to purchase a letter in the Sefer Torah, not just for the spiritual reason of having a connection and the protection of the Sefer Torah, but as well to try to fulfill the actual mitzvah deraisa of writing a Sefer Torah, which in this roundabout way somehow fulfills it.
Everybody ended up agreeing with the Rebbe?
The Svarim I saw recording it, yes. They recorded as halacha.
The Rebbe in the first Sikha didn't acknowledge the...
In the footnote, the Rebbe negated it, yes.
he negated the first Sikha.
In the first Sikha, the Rebbe negated fulfilling the mitzvah through a joint Sefer Torah. And that's why he adapted the novelty that you must say the halacha is like the second approach.
But in the first sequel, did he acknowledge that buying a Pasal Sefer Torah or...
No, everywhere, that's halacha. Buy a Pasal Sefer Torah and fix it, you
That's
get
fine.
it.
Everybody
That's,
agrees.
that's
Or hiring a scribe. That's
Yeah.
that's still a way to do it. Okay, got some cash.
Okay, our second subject, also from Yeridei, a neighbor of the
I'm
first
sorry,
subject.
one more question about this.
Yeah.
Like, kind of what Gershon was asking. What are the attributes where you know it's officially a communal Sefer Torah? For instance, Tamimi directed a Sefer Torah. I bought a letter or two.
Who owned it? Whose official Sefer Torah was it?
Okay.
Tamimi
I'm
Derech.
assuming it's a communal
So
Torah.
Tamimi Derech is doing a Sefer Torah, and it was meant to be that everyone who donates is as if that they are purchasing a Sefer Torah. Then yes, 100%. But if I'm writing a Sefer Torah for myself, and I'm collecting stock, if people to help me to write my Sefer Torah, then no, you're not Yetzer with
Okay,
me.
but how do we know they went by the qualifications that they're an official community Sefer Torah? Was it, I mean, that they do something the way it's
I
written
would
out?
assume that that's the idea. That's the whole idea of a shul writing a Sefer Torah. The same idea as a community writing a Sefer Torah. Shul is a community. And therefore, that is most likely the idea. The point is that it should be, if a person is writing it, le'ilei nishma somebody, a Sefer Torah, you have to check out, is this guy taking ownership of it? Who's going to be, in other words, if Tamimei Derech gets, changes hands of ownership, is the current rabbi Tamimei going to take that Sefer Torah home saying it's mine? If he is, then nobody fulfilled the mitzvah with that. That's not that kind of Sefer Torah.
It was a big donor, and it was done in
Right,
the name of
so I understand. If
But
there's a
did the
big
donor give it to Tamimi Derech
is it,
in
does
perpetuity?
the donor
or-
think it's his Sefer Torah?
I would guess not. Okay, so there's
There were a lot of
not a
donors.
strict thing where you can do things.
There were a lot of bigger donors.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all the children's Sefer Torah.
All communal. All communal.
That's all communal.
Yes.
So the
That's the
children,
whole point.
They don't have
They're trying to fulfill that idea of the Rebbe said in that Sikha.
Can a child fulfill before he's 13, a boy?
Right, so yeah, the Rebbe discussed that in the Sikha. Yeah.
Can.
Yeah, you can. Zach and Before it was all discussion. Okay. The laws of Avodah Zarah, we're going to give a short summary, not so short, it's going to be the rest of the class, but in comparison to how many laws there are, it's short.
Throw in the issue that we saw on social media yesterday a lot about how in Israel you don't have to do nitful knock rules, that Israel doesn't count. Just so
So last time I checked, social media is not a Rav and not a source for halacha.
they quoted the Rabbi.
Halacha, even if they quote the Rabbi. Last time I checked, halachic matters are to be paskin by Rabbanim and not by irresponsible people quoting things on social media.
Okay,
And the halacha is very clear. On the subject, minhag in Eretz Yisrael is to keep the customs of nittul, at least in our community, in the Chabad community. In other communities, they keep it different days. In Chabad, we keep it tonight. Last night, the night of the 25th. And therefore, there's no room to start quoting letters of the Rebbe. It's nice to quote to discuss, Yagdo Torah v'Yadu, but the quote, as Allah Lamais, is a tremendous breach of the custom, and it's Prikas El.
What?
Prikas El, it removes the idea that every person can just start opening up books, not well versed in how to paskin, and start quoting things and changing a custom of all Israel that we follow here, ready for, Rav Lando followed it in Eretz Yisrael. There was also soon discussion on the subject regarding making Kiddush in the 7th hour in Eretz Yisrael. And there's different letters that go back and forth, but the bottom line is that this is the minhag. This is the minhag that was kept. The laws of Avodah Zarah. Okay. First, let's define Avodah Zarah. There's many halachas relevant to Avodah Zarah regarding benefiting, regarding saying the names, as we will see, all the different halachas involved. And first and foremost, we have to define what Avodah Zarah is. Avodah Zarah is quite simply either worshiping any item that's not God, or the belief, even if the person is not actually worshiping, to any item other than God. The belief of any item other than God that he is a deity.
Period.
The reason why I emphasize that is to negate the chiddush that one individual wanted to progress here in Eretz Yisrael, that Christianity today is no longer Avodah Zarah because they don't actually worship Yashka, they just believe he's a deity. That is not correct.
What about the cross?
They don't worship the cross. We went through this in one of our other shiurim. I'm not a bucky in every sect of Christianity, but of the knowledge I do have, they don't worship the cross. And that's why in Shuvas we find that the cross is not a chayfetz of it, is a mamash. We'll go through this. Okay, so let's go through some of the halachas involved, and some of these I'll just mention that they need research and the shaila of the Rav.
Why did the Rambam say that Chisurim Avodah Zarah? Why did the Rambam say that a church is a place of Avodah Zarah?
Did I say it's not?
That they serve this.
Did I say it's just because they don't serve the cross doesn't mean it's not. There's many other Avodah.
I mean,
Let's see. We'll see.
Let's
progress. We'll see. We're going to get to it in Mitzvah. One restriction towards Avodah Zarah, people don't know, it's forbidden to look at Avodah Zarah. Even to look. Merely look with your eyes, just to look. So, that's why it was always Minhag Yisrael to avoid looking at a church. A church is not Mamash Avodah Zarah, it's the building where they pray to Eisivish. It's a building where they worship to Avodah Zarah, but it's not actual idolatry. So, to say that there's a prohibition due to this, of looking at the building, is a stretch, but nonetheless, the custom of Israel was always to, number one, to avoid looking. Number two, if you accidentally look, to say the pasuk of Shachis Teshafsenu Sav Savenu Kicherem Hu, it's a pasuk in Dvarim, saying that it's a place of abomination. And as the Rebbe mentioned in a talk, that the custom of Jewry was that when a woman who's pregnant would walk near a place of Avodah Zarah, she would cross the street. She wouldn't walk by the actual base of Avodah Zarah, but she would walk in a different area.
What looking at the clock?
So, clock of it, right. So, where does this come up? So, in most of the Western world doesn't really have statues that people worship. Even in places such as anyone who's been to Rio de Janeiro, where they have a huge statue of Isa Ish, of Yashka. I believe it was donated by the Dutch in the 1500s or 1600s. So huge. Anyone ever been there? Rio de Janeiro.
Oh, no, I've seen the...
Yeah, so I've been there before. I actually went up back in the day into that area, but there is no Isser to look. Is there an Isser to look at him? Is there an Isser to look at him? So they don't actually worship that statue. They don't believe the statue is the Getchke. They believe that what it represents is a deity, and that's a Avodah Zarah, but they don't believe the statue is a Getchke. And so too with other statues that they make, it wouldn't have the Isser of looking at it from this perspective. But notice, as we said, that Jews would avoid doing so. But if you visit Eastern countries, until today, this is very relevant. So you have all the time, it's very in for some very strange reason. People go to Bangkok, people go to India, and they have Avodah Zarahs all over the place. All over the place. You go in a taxi in Bangkok, they have Avodah Zarah hanging right in the front window, the window shade. And so it's also the look. It's his getchke. It's his driving getchke. So he buys he has a few of them. He has one for driving. He has one for getting out of the car. They have a lot of getchkes. They're cheap. So bottom line is that it's forbidden to look at it. You can't even look at it. You want to go to a tourist attraction. They have tourist attractions there. You see big getchkes where everyone comes and they give them food and give them money. A great place for poor people to visit. Well, no one's looking, right? But nonetheless, it's forbidden to go there because you're not allowed to look. They actually worship these things till this very day.
We have the same problem in Haifa,
What do they have there?
the Baha'i Temple.
The what?
The Baha'i Temple.
Yeah, explain. Elaborate. What is it?
It's Baha'i is today's present day, I think, Zoroastrianism.
They have idols there outside
I
that they worship?
haven't. They have a big garden there that's visited by everybody. What they have in the garden, I don't know. I've
Right,
never been there.
So we're very specific here. The Issa here is specifically to the actual idol, to the actual Avodah Zarah.
Mm-hmm.
There's many, there's many additions, accessories to the Avodah Zarah. If we banned all the accessories, we wouldn't be able to look anywhere. You can't look at a guy that serves Avodah Zarah. He's an accessory. It's not the accessories, it's only the actual Avodah Zarah itself. So this is something to beware if anyone ever visits these eastern countries. There's an actual prohibition of Avodah Zarah, and they have hashpah. There's a hashpah on a person's nefesh, and a person's soul. Who knows, it can enter kfirah and heresy. Chas v'shalom.
So does this affect, if you're planning on being a tourist, there's a place you should not go to?
100%. 100%. Everyone who goes, like when you want to go tour a country, you look at all the physical attractions. You also have to look at the spiritual. You look for kosher food. People aren't aware of these things. People, Haredi people, they go to these places, they stay, and they go walk by the street and they look at these idols. 100% forbidden. The mitzvah to destroy idols. There's a mitzvah deraisa to destroy avodah zarah, just like it's a mitzvah to destroy chametz. In fact, chametz there's things very similar that's learned from there. Just like one of the ways of destroying chametz is to grind it into small pieces and then throw it in the wind. So too, if let's say this taxi driver who you refuse to look at his window, by his window, and he's, what's going on, and then he says, you're such a great passenger, I want to give you a matana, this getchke. So you have a mitzvah, as soon as you can, put it in the food grinder and turn it into dust and then throw it into the wind. Just make sure that's not a practice of idolatry in that country, because then they would actually be doing avodah zarah. So that you have to negate. Okay, so based on this, it's not just limited to an actual idol, but also accessories of avodah zarah may have this prohibition as well. And since Christianity is defined as avodah zarah, I've done this, explained this in a few classes. We're not going to repeat it here. You can look at those videos on the website in depth as to how and why it's avodah zarah, but that's the halacha. Christianity is avodah zarah. So if, let's say, a church is going out of business, either the synagogue is more popular or people are just not interested anymore in Yashka, they lost interest. And they're like NFL football Sundays, they don't go to church anymore. So, and it's going out of business, everything 90% off. So the church is selling everything. A yard sale. You have some nice chandeliers, you have some nice candles. Can you buy stuff there? It's a shayla if you can buy stuff from a church. Even if it's a good bargain. It's a shayla if you can buy stuff from a church. Because officially,
arguably neutral item.
Benches.
Even furniture. Even furniture. Yeah. I'm not giving a final psak on this. There's different positions here, but I'm just saying this is something you would need to ask a shayla about if you can buy items from a church.
To buy the church itself. They did that.
Right, so that's discussed in place.
New Russia, they had a shul like that for many, many years.
The Chabad shul around the block from me was a church.
In the past.
Yeah, not now. It's around the block from my house. And so on.
There is a shayla regarding if that is permitted to be done to turn a church into a basic knesset.
I guess Chabad says it's okay because it's a idolatry.
There are people who do it, but it's a shayla of the Rav, and it's not just an all-out mutter. It's not just all out. Oh, there's no restrictions at all. Just go buy a church. Next best place in town. Just go buy a church and turn it into a shul. It's a shayla of a Rav. It all depends on the rule, but there's different details.
That happened in Litchfield, Connecticut, with the Chabad there. That they bought a church from the 1800s, turned it into a Chabad house, and there was a whole problem during the time of the medical.
Who wouldn't let?
All the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court that sided with Chabad. Anyway.
But I don't think they were dealing with the halachic issues, right? They were dealing with
they were dealing with
commercial property,
and
residential area zoning. And it was zoning.
This was a former church that Chabad made into a Chabad house.
Let's not forget, churches are all those breakaway minions. That's what churches are, right? Yashka was a breakaway minion, and he created breakaway shoes, and we're just begging him back. Yeah.
No kidding. But we had a mice in North Miami Beach. We were buying a facility, we were trying to buy a facility which was a Unitarian church. And we got on the phone with Rabbi Dvorkin, with Rabbi Korf, et cetera, and he told us what to do.
What did he say?
He said that we had to ask one of the members of the congregation to take of the church to take something off the wall. Badafka.
You mevatel the church. Yeah.
Somehow mevatel it, yeah.
So as I said, this is a shaila of a rav. It's not just an all-out heter to go buy a church, and certainly not to sell a shul to a church.
It was Unitarian, not.
So,
It's also Unitarian, which is not
They had no siman.
typical Christianity.
okay.
They believe Yeshua's a prophet like everybody else.
Another issue brought down is that a person is not allowed to be near idols. He's not allowed to bow down in front of an idol, even if he's not intending for the idol. So if you happen to be in Bangkok and you happen to drop your wallet and happens to be this big, big Buddha over there, this big Getchke, ask someone else to pick it up for you. Hopefully. They're very honest people, they say.
Turn around. And
You can turn it around, but maybe a way of a design.
No,
They bend the other way as well.
that's
You have to find out. Drop down.
Okay.
That
Right.
is one of the kirachim.
Right.
It's
Right.
mamash avodah zarah.
yeah.
So you have to become a baki. You have to visit these places. You have to know how they worship, so you know what to avoid. So, okay. One of the shilas that circulated amongst Rabbanim in the previous generations is regarding owning money that contained pictures of avodah zarah. This was more widespread regarding the cross. Many currencies, many coins, contain engravings of the cross on it, and the leaning ruling of this is that the cross is not actual avodah zarah. It's a symbol of Christianity. It is not something they actually worship. This is not their getchke. They don't actually worship it down to the cross. That's what I said earlier, that the cross is an actual mamash avodah zarah, and therefore they didn't rule that you have to get rid of these coins. But it would be nice if you can just chop off a little bit of the cross, as was always minhag Yisrael, that we try to avoid the cross as much as possible. Mentioning the names of idols and foreign deities. So this is halacha very relevant. While we don't bump into idols every single day, the names of idols and avodah zarah religions are very popular. They're part of our culture, unfortunately, and we talk about them. Even when Mashiach comes, we'll talk about them in past tense, but they have existed. They're part of history. The question is, may you? And there is a prohibition, a biblical prohibition, to eradicate idolatry and therefore not to mention the names of idols and to try to give them a derogatory name. So, make up like a nickname for the idolatries that are derogatory. So that is a mitzvah to do. But to mention the name is an isser. Now, what is this? Is this applied to all types of idols, or is this regulated onto certain things? Like, for example, Christianity, what names is a person forbidden from mentioning? What about Greek mythology? Can a person mention, for learning purposes, I can say, can a person mention the name Zeus or any of the other 1,000, deities that they believed in? So we have here a few rules. Number one, it only applies to idols or idolatries that are currently not extinct. But those that are extinct, everyone became, progressed, no longer primitive. They've woken up to the reality that this is nothing, this is not doing anything for us, bankrupt. So these type of idols and idolatries, it's history, it's just part of the history books. So you can mention them. How do we know? Because the Torah itself says, the Torah mentions the idolatry of Kara, Baal, Keres, Nevoi, Ha'orchim, Lagad, Shulchan, Baal Tzafin. These are, how can the Torah say the names? So from here we learn, and it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch, and brought down in the Gemara and Sanhedrin, in chapter 147 in the Shulchan Aruch, and you're there, that there's no issur to mention the names of extinct idols.
Even names of months, Jewish month. Tammuz.
Tammuz, right. So they're extinct, Baruch Hashem, and therefore there's not a problem to mention the names. There's a question regarding Zeus. Greek mythology is an extinct religion. Nobody believes in it, but you do have a few people who are trying to re-engage in it today. The question is how much, if one person out of the 5 billion people on earth, believes in it, does that change the halacha? It's kind of hard to imagine that it would. That would have to be a substantial amount, I would believe. But I don't have a clear talk on this. Okay. But definitely to study Greek mythology or to study any of it is a biblical prohibition. We discussed in the past.
Sefer Rabbi. Not for a rabbi. If a rabbi needs to study,
If a rav or a person in a rabbinical position that needs to paskin on these things, then of course he can't paskin if he doesn't know the halachas. So when I had my discussion, I mentioned this a few times, when I publicized an email a few years ago regarding New Year's, that it's a Christian, it's a Christian holiday amongst Catholics and Lutherans. And I had a number of Rabbanim came out, we've never heard of this before, what are you saying? New Year's is just New Year's, it's a secular holiday, what are you making up halachas? I said, what are you talking about? You don't know, you're not a baki in Hilchas Christianity. He said, you're right, we're not. So I said, you're right, then agree that you can't pass in this area. If you don't know. If you don't know, you can't rule. So obviously, and by the way, that halacha is written in the Ramah.
And the Rebbe is saying Happy New Year.
Actually writes the word New Year. The Ramah actually writes that word.
And the Rebbe is saying Happy New Year to Rabbi Groner?
Yeah, to Rabbi Groner, last time I checked, is a religious Jew. He doesn't practice Christianity, God forbid.
I understand that. But, just say it.
So what?
I don't think we can compare.
it was his bliss. That was his bliss.
There's a minig Yisrael about saying New Year's. Minig Yisrael, a minig of some tzaddikim, not minig Yisrael, a minig of some tzaddikim to which New Year's taught the Yidden. Maybe, I don't know, maybe even to a guy who's not a practicing Christian, but obviously anyone who's a practicing Christian would be halachic problem, just like any halacha. We'll get to that, wishing people a good holiday. What's today's halacha? Can you wish people good tidings on their holiday? But this is an example of where, a few people have said this to me, but the Rebbe said, this is an example of someone who takes something that is completely asur according to halacha and uses a mistaken example from the Rebbe to try to make it mutter. It's unbelievable. That's why it says, Maise Rab, you can't do until he tells you, Leich lasis Maise. He tells you, go ahead and do it.
What about Thanksgiving?
That's a different, we're not going to get into that. We don't have time to get into Thanksgiving, but Thanksgiving, I have an article about that on my website, and you can look into the different sides and what the place can say, and what regulations apply and what not.
Could you go to a New Year's Eve party where there's not going to be...
Party we're going to get to later. Let's continue. Let's go down here. Let's continue. Okay, second big leniency regarding names of idols. And this comes up all the time, when you're... Can you mention the name, the most famous... Islam is not a problem. It's not a Veda Zarah, so we can mention all those names, Muhammad and all those guys. Osama bin Laden, all those guys. You can mention any of those people in Islam because none of them are... It's not a Veda Zarah, so we don't have... Islam doesn't apply... Nothing that we're learning here applies to Islam. It's not a Veda Zarah. Okay, so but Christianity is, and that's the majority of the world population. The greatest population of believers is Christianity, and it's very, very applicable because this comes up all the time. So can you mention the different names? Can you mention the name Jesus? Yashka, in his English name. So we have here a chiddush written in a number of Rishonim, and that is as follows. This is written in the Yereim, who was a student of Rabbeinu Tam, the prime student of Rabbeinu Tam, Agos Maimonides, and it's recorded in the later Achreinim, that the issur of mentioning the name of an idol is only in the case that the name was innovated for that purpose of that idol. So for example, let's use a word, which for learning's sake I'm saying this, okay, Mambay. Mambay, which used to be the city of Bombay, but they changed it to Mambay. Mambay is the name of an idol, and that term in Hindi language means deity. So that is a name forbidden to say. So that's why let's go back and start using Bombay. Okay, we Jews will use Bombay. Or Bombay, that's how the Indians say, right? Bombay.
All these Chabad.org stories about what happened there, they say the name over and over again.
Oh, maybe teach them something. Tell them, it should be avoided. The Rebbe was very strict with these things, but as a Jew, we follow Shulchan Aruch, we should be very strict with these things. Not just because the Rebbe was strict. Okay, so they probably don't know that it's the name of an idolatry. Any case of the luck where the actual name, its root, is an idolatry, meaning that the innovation is the meaning of a deity, then it's a problem. But if the name is a regular name, if, for example, a person was named Yeshua and they turned him into an idol, so now Yeshua now is a forbidden name? Yashka had a name before he became worshipped. He was only worshipped after he left the world, after he died. So his name was a regular name, and therefore there is no halachic problem in saying the word Yeshu. And we find in many Rishonim and Poskim that they use this name. The Rambam uses it. The Rambam uses it in his writings. He writes the name. And so too many other Rishonim and Acharonim write the name. Nonetheless, Minhag Yisrael is to avoid saying all of these names, all the names that are associated with Christianity. We avoid saying. That's the minhag, even though from another law doesn't transgress the Isser of mentioning the name of an idolatry. And,
so if it's a religion that's dead, then that wouldn't be.
Well, we already said an extinct.
So like, well, the planets are all most of the planets.
Right. So if it's an extinct religion, doesn't Baruch Hashem, we've progressed, and therefore that would not be a problem. But anything that's still worshipped, such as the Hinduism, is a problem.
Ger, whose name was Peter.
Peter is not an idol.
Not
He's not worshipped. They don't worship Peter. Do you know how much competition there would be if Yashka had a partner?
And Mary,
they don't worship her. They just say she was the mother.
Except
they don't worship her. That's what my research has uncovered, and that's what's written in the Chuvas.
They prayed to her to intervene.
Okay, we also prayed to Tzaddik and Havdalah.
That's what.
The Tshuva of the Chavas Yair, who was an Ashkenazi Rav, he knew full well what Christianity was. He was the chief rabbi of Germany in the 1700s. He was very well versed about Christianity, and he passed him that Mary is not a problem at all. Minadin, it is the name of a woman. It's Miriam, Mary, whatever you want to call her. But the custom, as I said, amongst God-fearing Jews, is to avoid saying all these names. Therefore, we're very careful when we don't say these names. I just said them now just to give out the halacha, but we don't say these names. We avoid saying them.
Even the other guys.
Yes, the name Mary we avoid. That we do avoid, but Peter and all these others, we don't. What's written is the following: Medadinins for sure mutter. First of all, they're not idols. Second of all, they're names of people. We already said names of people is not idols, so they have two advantages here. But the Isser by saints is to mention them with an introduction of reverence. So we don't say saint. That's usher to say saint. But to just say Peter, Paul, and all these guys.
Yusuf Saul-Polo, for instance.
Oh, so that's why we avoid saying it. That's why we
don't say it.
The minhag of Yidden is always make up some kind of
Simcha Monica.
Some kind of name for these. Yeah, even S is a little bit of a question because what does S stand for?
Did you say technically when you said Yeshu, that's the
what a Chassidim called Peterburg. Peterburg.
Yeah, Peterburg.
They ignored the S.
When you said Yeshu, that's like
that's the Hebrew,
the Jewish way of saying the one
that's the original name.
The J-E-S.
That's not the Jew. That's the original name.
Technically, the J-E-S-U-S is okay to say. Technically, we don't do it.
Also, Yud Shin Vav Ayin is technically okay. It's written in the Gemara. I already said it's the name of a person, but nonetheless, Minhag Yisrael is to avoid is to distance ourselves from Christianity as much as possible, and therefore we don't say these names at all.
Jews for Jesus.
Right. So what's written is that
it's a bad association.
We've mentioned this before that the Sefer Chassidim writes regarding Peter that you should call him Peter Chamor. Don't say Peter, say Peter Chamor.
Peter Chamor?
Yeah.
Peter the donkey?
That's what he writes. Even though he was Jewish and a tzaddik, as we've explained in different classes.
Is he sure? Is he sure?
Yeah. Listen to my classes on it.
I was once.
Listen. Last week,
Last Wednesday night.
Well, not on him. Wednesday night was in general, but the class on it was was for Test Tavis. I gave a whole rundown. There's
His
a
name
few
is
audios I did.
Shimon, no? What's his name?
Yeah, Shimon Peter. Shimon Petrus was his name. Okay. Just like there's an issur to mention their names, so too there's an issur to mention their festivals. And it's only mutter to mention their festivals if the festivals are not called, do not contain within their name the name of the deities. But if they do contain the name of the deities, then one may not mention it at all. And even if they don't, you can't mention in a way of reverence. So to say the word, and for educational purpose I'm saying the word, Christmas, is a question, is a mutter. The Christ is a very questionable word, possibly also according to Halacha to say. It's much worse than the word Jesus. It's much worse than the word Yeshu, because Menadin, that's mutter because it's not the name of it. It doesn't connote deity in the original word. But this, according to some Latin experts, does. Some say it means Messiah, but others actually...
Greek was later.
Greek.
No, it was Latin.
What did I
Greek.
write?
It was Latin for, it was,
It's Greek.
what's that?
Yeah, it is.
You know what? To me, Greek and Latin is the same. I don't know either language.
Not bad languages.
I know them one just as
Latin
well
is
as the
Christus.
other. So whatever, the point is
Latin
that
is Christus.
there's a machlekes amongst
Greek is Christus.
the Christian, amongst the Christians. Some say it means Messiah or anointed one, while others say it actually connotes deity. So according to the latter approach, depends which local priest you ask, it would be awesome to say. Because you can't, it's forbidden to say it if it means that's its initial meaning. So you would be forbidden to say the word Christmas. So therefore the best thing is, and that's the meaning of Yisrael, we don't say it. We would say Kratzmach, even Xmas is a shayla, because the X also, some Christian scholars say in Latin, is also the form, the other form of saying the CHR title. So therefore, some people think Xmas is, you're Xing the name, but no, that's actually a way that they use that term as well to connote the holiday. So therefore, the best thing is just to avoid saying the name altogether.
Xmas.
Say Kratzmach, you say
Kratzmach's tree.
Kratzmach.
The tree.
Or say 25th. The truth is now it's very accepted to do it. In the past 10 years in the United States, people no longer wish a merry, etc. They say happy holidays. It's become politically incorrect to say, that's one of the things that President Trump campaigned on. That now we'll be able to tell people a merry,
I just read a blog about that. What do you do if somebody says to you, Mary? The response is say, Shalom.
There's a problem of saying shalom to someone on this holiday. We'll learn about that. We'll learn about that.
What about the trees, Eloi, that you see?
But you can say, better than to say shalom would be have a happy holiday. The point I'm trying to bring is that it's becoming more and more acceptable in Western culture to not to use the word kratzmach, but to just use the word holiday. I'm telling you, this is a big discussion in the U.S.
It's even forbidden in some places.
The tree is a problem? I'm sorry,
Schools.
I'm asking something. The tree that you see all over, you can't avoid seeing trees.
No, it's not. They don't worship it.
They hang angels and stuff like that.
They don't worship it.
No.
They don't worship it.
They worship the
Nobody's
angels.
worshiping the tree.
They don't worship the angels either.
There's no.
They know what they're about. What the tree about.
Origins, there was actual worship.
Of course, people worshipped everything that moved, anything that existed. It's not a Veda Zarah. That's not a Veda Zarah. That's to sell it for a Jew. Many Jews own a lot of Kratzmach stores and sell products. They make a lot of money off these Gentile holidays. They have a lot of jokes, a lot of Jewish jokes.
They do here in Tzfat. You will see decorations that the people of Tzfat don't know what they're for. And I've seen them in people's houses, and I look at that and I say, that's a
They
such
say as
and
a joke
such.
that Yashka came up with Christianity in order to help solve the economic crisis happening in Israel at the time.
And it all comes from China today anyway.
With the little blinking lights and
You'll
stuff.
see stuff
Anyways.
here in our stores.
That's not so simple with what to sell. But the question is also a lot of people don't believe. A lot of people have trees, but they don't believe in any of this stuff. There's a lot of non-practicing people who follow the holiday. Okay, let's move on. Helping to build a temple of Avodah Zarah, so there is a prohibition in helping to build the actual temple itself, but the outskirts of the temple, the courtyard, is not an Isser, and therefore, let's say a church, it's forbidden to help build a church, and therefore we have all these shilas if a person was called in to do work inside of the church, to fix an air conditioner, all these things you have to contact the Rav. It's not so simple. If a person is allowed to do it, there are issues involved. It's discussed amongst the poskim, the different sides of it, when it's allowed, when not. Some poskim say it's completely usher to ever enter a church because there is a prohibition against entering a base of Avodah Zarah. It's forbidden to enter a base of Avodah Zarah. Those people who say that, it's just a minute we don't enter a church, but really you're allowed to, over on an Isser, it's absolutely forbidden to enter a base of Avodah Zarah, and a church is no different. And that's why Jews were very careful not to enter churches, to the point there's even discussion in poskim if it's considered of Israel Avodah Zarah, the person has to give up his life rather than to enter a church. Just to enter the church, not to do anything else, just to enter the place. Regarding a mosque, it's a little bit different. It is mutter to help build a mosque. It is not a base of Avodah Zarah, as we said. It may be a house of other things, but it's not a house of Avodah Zarah. We know that today, especially in all terrorist areas, mosques are the place where they train jihad fighters and usually keep the weapons. So over and many other Yisurim. And of course, the Allies can't destroy it because you're destroying a landmark, you're destroying a religious entity. Oh, but they're using it to throw missiles. It's rules of war. You can't. Okay, so this is the problem. Based on this, one of the things the place can discuss that we just said is forbidden to build a church. Are you allowed to pay taxes? Now, I know a lot of people are machmir not to pay taxes. And they can add this to their list of reasons why not. The real reason is because they want to save a few bucks at the end of the month. But, by the way, according to Halacha, you do have to pay taxes. This is a big discussion. In Paiskim, there's different discussions if you have to pay. Don't have to pay. Bottom line is the minhag Chabad is that we do pay taxes, meaning that we're very careful to follow the law of the land and to do our utmost to pay taxes as is required. A question that was brought up is, can we, number one, maybe we can exempt ourselves from paying taxes from a moral perspective due to that they support churches, which in the United States they don't. There's a separation of church and religion, so we don't have a church and state, so we don't have that question really applicable there.
Not so clear.
Go ahead, elaborate.
There are...
Is tax money going
There are
towards-
all kinds of exceptions that have been carved to get around the First Amendment. There's tax money that goes to take kids to parochial schools. There's tax money that goes to pay for textbook in parochial schools. There are a lot of those things where they finesse the...
Federal money or state money?
Both. Both.
Okay.
And Jews have done it too. Jews have used
Certainly here in Israel, where there is no separation of church or synagogue and state. This is the real shayla, is in this country. Can you pay taxes here when part of your Misrad Datot, which the Rebbe held may never ever be held that position by a religious Jew, because it requires him to give funds towards churches.
Misrad, what? Which one?
The Ministry of Religion.
Oh.
The Rebbe held it's forbidden for a Jew to hold that position. Because he has to sign off money towards a church. This is this Isser that we're talking about. But is there an Isser for me to give money to the Israeli government, which will then allocate some of those funds toward Misrad HaDatot, which some of that money will go to build mikvahs, build synagogues, to do great things, but some of it will go to build a getchke, to build a base of Avodah Zarah. And the answer is it's mutter. And the reason why it's mutter is because it's going first to the government. If the church itself was placing a tax, as was customary back in Europe in many cities, then it would be mamish forbidden. It would be a problem. You'd have to find a middle way to do it. But here, the money's first going to the middleman, which is the government, and then they're allocating it. So the issue is not on us, and there is no prohibition. Going back to what we said before about the names, I'm going to mention again that even though in Adin we said it's mutter to say the name of Yashka, etc., the minhag Yisrael was so strong not to say it that Rabbi Eliezer Hiltzheimer, who was the Rav in Berlin in the late 1800s. He was a Talmud of a Samson Raphael Hirsch, a Talmud Muvok. He received a shaila from one of the schools in Berlin, that one of the teachers was teaching a class, Jewish teachers, and was saying the name of Yashka in the class. And they asked him, and they wanted to fire him for doing so. They wanted to fire the teacher, and he was asked the shaila, are they allowed to fire him? And he said, and he goes through the whole tshuva, and the minadin, it's mutter, but nonetheless, since this is a minhag Yisrael, it's forbidden for him to change the minhag, and therefore, if he doesn't stop, show him the door. Giving presents to a guy has a few different aspects in halacha, nothing to do with Avodah Zarah. We'll just deal with the Avodah Zarah part. Giving presents to idol worshippers on their holiday is a prohibition. It's forbidden to give them a matana. Now, for most of us, Baruch Hashem, this is not applicable, but for other Jews, this is, for the simple reason that they own companies in which there are Gentile employees. And a common practice of a business world is that you try to give your employees something by the holiday season, and it's very customary to give them holiday gifts for Kratzmach or for New Year's. And is that allowed? Answer. This custom of giving matanis has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's not something that started recently, with the rise of with the rise of employee rights. And we find the Ramah discussing this already in the Shulchan Aruch and in the chapter 149, in chapter 148, in which he states that it's aser. However, you have two ways around. Number one, you can give the presents a day before or a day later. It's not on that day. And number two, if it's very difficult, we don't apply the iser if in the case that it will cause ava, enmity, to friction between the Jewish population and the Goyim. Especially back then, we know that causing anti-Semitism could be cost us blood of the Jewish population. And therefore, in many things, they were lenient in order to prevent there being ava, enmity amongst the Goyim. And this was no different, and therefore they said that if you need to, this is what is politically correct. Otherwise, he gave it a day before, he gave it a day after, then you can give it even on that day. But if you can get away with giving it the day before, practically today, we can assume all employee, especially the fact that it's a legal holiday, they get dismissed for Katzmach. So therefore, you anyways give it before, so it's not a problem.
What's the it again? I just missed the whole thing. What's the giving?
Presents.
Presents.
Do you give presents to your hundreds of Gentile employees when it comes to Katzmach and New Year's? Do you?
Do I?
Yeah.
Do I have Gentile employees?
Good, so you don't have a problem, you see? That's how machmir you are. You didn't even want to have employees. Okay. We're just going to wrap up a few more things and we'll call it a night. We discussed already in the past in length the issue of listening to music of Avodah Zarah, and therefore we said that some of the classical musics that we all love, since they were composed for the church, it would be problematic to listen to them, and certainly Tehillim, psalms that are sung by churchgoers or by famous church chazanim. What are they called? What's the name of the church chazanim? They don't have an official name. They call them a chazan, like us. Okay. So the chazanim, the cantors of the church, who came out, famous counter, he's coming out with a new disc of songs of David. It's forbidden to listen to it. The songs of Avodah Zarah, that is likewise prohibited.
Books. Books. You can't books.
We already said it's an Isser min HaTorah to read books of Avodah Zarah, even if you're just, curious George, you just want to know what they do, so you know what you don't do. As I said before, it's only mutter for the purpose of paskening halacha, but a person is forbidden from going into these books. And that's why we mentioned this in the shir on Wednesday night to the woman, that when someone asked the Rebbe the following question, the Rebbe answered as follows. Someone asked the Rebbe that they are trying to push in the Department of Education of the United States, federal, that there should be a learning of a religious subject of learning in the schools. Not one religion, but just a general scope of like history of different religions, which would of course include Christianity and others. And is it allowed? Do they have to fight this in the federal court that it goes against the which amendment?
The separation of churches.
First Amendment.
First Amendment.
Okay, that it goes against our First Amendment. So should the Jews try to fight this in court and get it legalized against the Constitution? And the Rebbe answered that it's an Isser min HaTorah to learn, for any Jew to learn from these books. And therefore, based on that, it's understood that everyone that has the ability to fight this has to fight it. And the Rebbe told them to fight it in court and let him know of the details of the fight. As far as I know, I don't know what happened, but I know that they don't teach that. It's very difficult to get something like that in the United States.
Comparative religion,
Supreme Court.
maybe it's only the college basis.
Yeah, I understand, but you are allowed to take a course in it if you want, but to make it mandatory study in a public school of education will never pass the Supreme Court unless something changes.
Well, if you're studying,
even the moment of silence,
Yeah, the moment
which
of
has
silence.
nothing to do with a religion, as we know, failed the Supreme Court in 1963. So
it seems like if you're studying just history, like world history, that.
you have to be very careful.
But
if you study world history, when Yashka was around, when was he born? Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But once you start getting into the ideologies of the religion,
not ideologies, but I mean, for example, world history is how King George set up the Anglican Church. It's all part of.
So as I said, it
of
has to
history.
be done
It
with
isn't done necessarily.
just like food needs to be checked that it doesn't have non-kosher ingredients, such a thing would need to be checked that it doesn't have non-kosher ingredients. This Rabbi Desar is a very severe issue. Okay, we'll conclude with really the subject that was in today's day halacha, which was greeting others on the holidays, on their holiday. So the halacha is as follows: it's written in Shulchan Aruch that it's forbidden to enter the home of an Oved Avodah, an idolater, and to greet him, Shalom Aleichem, how you doing? You're not allowed to greet him on that day. We learn from here, but then it says that if, however, you meet him on the street, then you can greet him in a low and melancholy demeanor, like Tisha B'Av. Like you meet him like Tisha B'Av. Some people are maching the whole year, they greet you like it's Tisha B'Av. Even on Tisha B'Av, you're supposed to greet. Some people are so maching, they don't greet at all. You say hello, they don't answer back. It's called B'nei V'Adik Anoris. Someone who doesn't answer back, steal him. He's stolen hello from you. You say, if someone says hello to you, and you don't answer back or do something, a gesture of acknowledgement, in heaven the person will be held responsible for stealing. He said, I never stole a dime in my life. You stole over 10,000 hellos.
Well,
some people have a minhag, they don't answer back. It's a minhag.
On Tisha B'Av, you're saying?
Ever. So that's wrong. Someone says Good Shabbos, you have a chiyuv to answer back Good Shabbos. Or something, acknowledge the person. Acknowledge that the person exists. Otherwise, you're considered a god. You just stole. Yeah.
You took their hello?
Yes.
Violating every Shabbos
For free?
all the time.
Well, we have
Maybe
to
just a
start
schnorrer.
doing
I would have been just a schnorrer.
Well, we can assume that people are hard of hearing or they're in the middle of a deep conversation they didn't hear. We have to give the benefit of the doubt, but that won't help if in truth they heard and didn't answer. Okay, let's finish this off. So we learn from here two things from this halacha. Number one, it seems that the main issur is to enter the home of the idolater, meaning to be proactive in the greeting. But if I happen to meet them, then even though it's their holiday, I'm allowed to say, hello, how are you? And maybe I'm even allowed to say, have a happy holiday, But again, in a low voice and melancholy demeanor. Practical halacha is like this. Okay, back in the day, we see from the Poskim, not just in this halacha, but in other halachas of greeting, that greeting people was a major, major part of social skills. It was, it had literal laws. Forget about Jewish laws, just laws of social skills of greeting people, which today has been turned on its head. There's no laws anymore. Everyone just does what they want. But there used to be real, set in place demeanors that people acted, and it was actually offensive if you walked by the street with someone and you guys didn't exchange a hello with each other. No one said hello to each other. It would be very offensive. And I think today, one of the reasons why this has changed so much is, first of all, population has moved. And it's constantly moving. We're all over the place. Back in the day, you grew up in the shtetl, you knew everyone in the shtetl, even the goyim, it was the same people. Once in a while, you get a new face, but it was generally everyone the same. And if it was a guest, everyone would greet him. But today, but nonetheless, the point is that back in the day, people were very careful in greeting people. So I think the way I wrote the halacha is like this. Today's times, if you don't know the person, then it's similar to going into his house and wishing him on the day of his holiday. So don't go out and greet every Christian on Kratzmach and say happy holidays. That would fall under this. Because today it's not accepted. In fact, in New York, if you say hello to someone on the subway, they will look at you weird. Are you crazy?
They'll shoot you.
What did I do to you? What are you after? You can't. So obviously, if it's an acquaintance. So then that's what we learn here in a melancholy voice. Don't say, Mary, happy. Melancholy voice. Yeah, I have a really bad stomachache, really sorry to hear. You don't have to tell him, that you have opposition to his religion, but not in an exciting voice. Now, this would apply. So the minhag that some people are doing nowadays, that have a lot of themselves do on social media, where they have Gayish friends and they'll write on their Facebook page, wishing all of our friends a Merry Kratzmach or even Happy Holidays. There's no answer for that. There's no answer for that. You're going into if you want someone who you know, when you meet them, they page you and at least it's socially acceptable for you to reply back. So you can do so. But to be proactive about it, that's what we learned from the Shulchan Aruch, not to be done. The same would apply for New Year's, to practicing Catholics and, as I said, Lutherans. All the other people, it's extinct for them. Protestants.
Are people
Protestants.
Jews? There's Jews who celebrate,
No, but they don't believe in the
right. So you could say
idolatry
happy
aspects of
holiday
Christ.
to a Jew or a non-Jew who doesn't celebrate.
It's not minhag Yisrael to tell people Happy New Year's on New Year's.
Right.
But would there be an issue? No, I don't see an issue. No. Okay, that's the answer today. Meretz Hashem next week. We will begin our introductory lesson towards the new course.
So mention a little bit more about it now. These people are not.
Yes. So the new course is so next week I want to have the full introduction. Okay, that's what the introduction's about. To introduce the course. So this would be an introduction to the introduction.
Pitch what it's going to be about.
Pitch what it's going to be about. It's a goal we're setting is to try to go through all the practical halachas in the Shulchan Aruch. Starting from the beginning and making our way all the way till the end. It's not going to happen overnight. This is a number of years of a process. But just like the Daf Yomi they do in 7 years, I hope we'll accomplish this twice in 7 years, or at least maybe finish the whole thing after 4 years or 5 years, whatever it is. But nonetheless, we're on a goal towards working our way through and finally making it to the end. At the same time, what I wanted also to do is we would have this online and this would be a share that anybody can join and participate in either live or later on for the rest of history.
Through this mechanism.
So long as the internet is around.
Through this?
Yes. So this is a very important piece of this project. And they'll be able to have a series of halachas from the beginning of Shulchan Aruch, and I think it's very monumental. The beginning of Shulchan Aruch to have only focusing on the practical halachas. You have many halachas. You have Chabad.org. They have someone there who does a great job. He reads from the Alter Rebbe. I think he's up to now Hilchos. He's up to maybe Kufman Hay. But it's a lot.
Not the Alter Rebbe.
We're going to use the Mechaber Shulchan Aruch as our guideline material. So that's what, and the reason is because it's a lot shorter than the Alter Rebbe's. But even in the Mechaber, we're not reading every halacha. The point of this course is for us to get all the gold out. What's practically relevant and important for us to know. Not to chas v'shalom negate anything else, but that's what the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch did. He brought only the things that are most relevant. So it's going to be a lot more than just Kitzur. We're going to focus on a lot of practical things that are not mentioned in Kitzur. But that's going to be our main focus. To go through siman after siman, a topic, subject after subject.
With the Ramah.
Again, reading inside, it'll be selective, what to read, what not to read. But in opinions, yes, it will be very similar to what the Shirim are doing today, where I give you the different opinions.
Okay.
Sfardim, Mechaber, Ashkenazim, Ramah, Alter Rebbe,
You'll leave the Alter Rebbe. Okay, so everybody understands. We're talking about Yosef Karo Shulchan Aruch here. is the
That's
basis.
going to be our book that we're going to be focusing on, but if we need to, we'll read inside something else as well. At the same time, what we can do is maybe dedicate the last 15 minutes of the class for just general questions on halacha that anyone has, and we can focus on that so we won't lose you won't have to wait 3 years from now until you're learning that, your test vav sivan tafshin heikim.
Are you going to read inside so people have a sefer? Are you going to read inside?
Yes, I think everyone should have a sefer.
The Shulchan Aruch. You should
Yeah.
find out
Or
where to
Mishnah
get.
Brura. What do you mean find out where to get? You have
There's
downstairs.
Mishnah Brura.
The Mishnah Brura is a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch.
I understand about that, but I mean,
The words are the same. It contains the words of the Mechaber.
Isn't there just a basic Shulchan Aruch? Just the Mechaber Shulchan Aruch with the Ramah?
There's many books that were commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch. They all include word for word what the Shulchan Aruch wrote.
So you're suggesting Mishnah Brura, not just the basic Shulchan Aruch with the Mechaber?
There is no such thing today really as a book of just Shulchan Aruch. It's always with some commentary.
So what are the other options other than the Mishnah Brura? What are the other options?
The Shulchan Aruch.
The regular Shulchan Aruch with the Shach, the Taz, the Magen Avraham, and all the other 10 Neisikim.
That'll be okay to use?
It's all the same words, yes.
Okay. I think that would be good. Because it's,
Reading, we're staying on top. We're staying only in the Mechaber Ramah.
reading inside.
And I'm going to fill in the blanks. That's what I'm here for.
Okay, so listen, guys. Next week, he's going to start with an actual introduction to the topic. This was just a pitch of the overall idea. So next week, next Tuesday, there's going to be the beginning, and you're going to start with an introduction. I'm not going to read inside halachas next week. It's going to be an introduction overall.
Well, I'm going to give an introduction about learning halacha. We're going to do something. It's a topic. We're doing a topic to introduce the importance of this course.
Next week, okay.
Can you possibly this week put out some sort of a?
We will be putting out something for sure.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe by tomorrow.
Maybe we'll get Chabad.org to do it.
Do what?
To put it up.
On Jewish TV. Okay. I can talk to the Nachum's rabbi.
Do they have all the things that go live to have like 10 people review every word? And
No.
Probably.
No.
No, I don't know.
So what if someone says something that one of the editors of
Then they'll deal with it
Chabad
after the fact.
So I got that.